Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and this is Andrew from Campaign Pay It Forward. I'm a medical instructor for them. Today, we're going to be going over one of my favorite topics, and this topic is so important to me because without bystander intervention, by the time we arrive as EMS responders, we're there to recover a body. So by taking a look at this video, by listening to it, by understanding it, and by implementing it if you feel safe enough to do so, you are truly making an impact. I just want to say that first before we go ahead with the slideshow. So thank you so much for joining us today for Stop the Bleed course. So Stop the Bleed came about by Homeland Security and a bunch of other agencies because of two primary incidences that happened. One was the Boston bombing, which most of you guys are familiar about, and if you're not, you can Google it. In the Boston bombing, 3 people were killed, 17 people lost a limb, and then hundreds of people were injured. And then you take another incident, like the Sandy Hook shooting, where sadly 20 students ended up dying, and 6 adults also ended up dying. So you take these two incidences, and Homeland Security was wondering, okay, so why do we have a bunch of people that were injured, or people that lost their limb, and only 3 fatalities, versus if you look at Sandy Hook incident, where it was actually 100% fatality, including the shooter. So with Boston bombing, they realized there was an incident command structure that was already set up, and it was set up basically like military National Guards were already there. You had nurses, you had doctors, you had LE law enforcement, you had firefighters already there, just in case anything should happen. With the incident command structure, everybody converged on that specific location and started to treat immediately. Versus with Sandy Hook shooting, you had one nurse, and sometimes may not even be a nurse. It's just someone who is medically qualified and may not understand about bleeding intervention in a serious note like a shooting. And then none of the teachers knew how to intervene. None of the students knew how to intervene in terms of trying to save a life. After the study was conducted with the Sandy Hook, they found out a number of students could have been saved if a tourniquet was applied, if direct pressure was applied, if packing the wound was applied. So with these two incidences, the Homeland Security pushed a new program, and they're like, hey, we're teaching a bunch of people how to do like CPR, AED, how to do chest compressions, everyday person how to intervene and initiate care with like CPR. Why can't we do that with bleeding? And so this program was derived by Homeland Security, Stop the Bleed, to encourage bystanders like you to intervene, because it is absolutely critical. And we'll talk about some of the arteries and stuff like that that will bleed out within 4 minutes. So without further ado, that's how we got to Stop the Bleed course. So these are some of the committees and programs that helped make the Stop the Bleed program. The American College of Surgeons Committee on Trauma, the American College of Emergency Physicians, the National Association of Emergency Medical Technicians, the Committee on Tactical Combat Casualty Care. I just want to alert you that some of the images shown during this presentation may be disturbing to you. Why you should take this training? The number 1 cause of preventable death after injury is bleeding. Where can I use this training? You can use it at your home, you can use it at school, in a shooting situation, in a weather-related situation or an outdoor situation, in a car or vehicle crash, or in a commercial space or office space. The goals of this program, or of the slideshow, is to identify, recognize life-threatening bleeding, and then number 2, stop the bleed. Take steps to stop the bleed by putting pressure, by packing, or use of a tourniquet, or maybe a combination of all 3. Your safety is your first priority. If you are injured, you cannot help others. Help others only when it is safe to do so. The situation changes or becomes unsafe. Stop, move to safety, and if you can, take the victim with you. Your safety is your first priority. Wear gloves if you can, preferably nitrile gloves. If you get blood on you, be sure to clean any part of your body that has blood, that the blood has touched. You should wash your hands for about 30 seconds, or maybe sing the ABC song or happy birthday song. Tell a healthcare provider that you got blood on you and follow his or her direction. So this is a little bit different from the ABCs you might have been used to if you've actually taken a medical class. Once again, Homeland Security is like, hey, let's throw another acronym out there. ABC is Alert 911. B for bleeding. C for compress. So once again, A is for Alert 911. B is for bleeding. C is for compress. Alert 911. Nowadays, everybody has a cell phone. Put it on speaker while you start treating for the bleeding or while you start looking for the bleeding. You don't have to have the phone directly to your ear. Make sure to put it on speaker so that way your hands are free and you can start looking for that bleeding. Time is of the essence. Call 911. Know your location. Follow instructions provided by a 911 operator. Please, when you tell the operator your location, don't be like, oh, I'm in an office building. Thank you very much. That helps us out a lot. Be very specific. What number is the office building? What building name are you in? Be as specific as possible. I know your adrenaline might be up. I know maybe you might be hyperventilating. A lot of things are going through you. You might be having tunnel vision. But just please be aware of your surroundings. When you're going into an office space, check what room number it is, what's the building's name, and the EMS procedures. B. Bleeding. Bleeding. Find the source of the bleeding. Look for continuous bleeding, large volume of bleeding, pooling of blood. There may be multiple places the victim is bleeding, especially with gunshot wounds or shrapnel going throughout the body. Clothing may also hide life-threatening bleeding. That is why it is very, very important that you rip up the clothing and you check where the bleeding is happening. So bleeding can happen on the extremities, which is highlighted in the blue, and the extremities are your arms and your legs. Then you have junctional wounds, which is the neck, armpits, and groin. And those are once again called junctional wounds. And then you have the core area, also sometimes known as the box area, from your neck to your hip area, or to the bottom of your stomach. Compress and pressure. Apply direct pressure to the wound. Focus on the location of the bleeding. Use just enough gauze or cloth to cover injury. If pressure stops the bleeding, keep pressure on the wound until help arrives. And then here they have a video. Oh, nope. Here we go. So that's a mimic of a gunshot wound. It's the exit of a gunshot wound because you see how it expands. She's demonstrating direct pressure, and she's putting her whole weight into it, her whole shoulders. You don't want to just put your weight of the hand in it. You actually want to put your shoulders over the injured area, put a cloth, a t-shirt, anything that's sort of sterile, and put direct pressure over the wound. Compress versus packing. For larger wounds, superficial pressure is not effective. If bleeding is from a deep wound, pack gauze tightly into the wound until it stops the bleeding, holding pressure until help arrives. So you don't want to put direct pressure, as you see over here. With a big wound, you want to pack it in. And then we're going to see a video about packing. One of the methods is the quick clot, which she is opening up right now. So she's actually putting it in a laceration this time. So she's taking her hand and she's actually stuffing it into the wound. If you see spraying, which is arterial bleeding, and it's that big enough of a wound, you can take your fingers, and then sometimes if you can reach into it, you can actually stop the bleeding from happening by pressing down on the artery. If you can't do that, then you do what she did, where she stuffed the gauze inside the actual body, where it starts to coagulate and clot, and then you put direct pressure over the packing of the gauze that you just did, and you keep the pressure there until EMS arrives. Compress packing arms and legs, neck, armpits, groin, and body. So a tourniquet. Apply 2 to 3 inches above the wound. Do not use a tourniquet on the elbow or a knee, or also known as joints. Do not place the tourniquets on any of the joints. Tighten tourniquet until bleeding stops. I will re-emphasize, tighten the tourniquet until the bleeding stops. Not when the person complains of pain, but when the bleeding has actually stopped. Do not remove the tourniquet. Please never, never, never remove the tourniquet from the patient. You can apply the tourniquet to yourself, which is also known as self-aid, and then you can apply it to other people. If multiple people are shot and you're shot, it might sound selfish, but apply the tourniquet to yourself and then render aid to other people. If you end up getting passed out, you can render aid to other people, so it's always good to apply a tourniquet to yourself and then render help to other people if you're able to do so. Tourniquets can be used over clothing. If you're using a tourniquet near where your cell phone is, your wallet is, if you're maybe in a tactical setting and you have a hip holster or a leg drop, you might want to remove that stuff and then apply the tourniquets. Never apply tourniquets over bulky items. A second tourniquet may be required to stop the bleeding. If you put a second tourniquet on, you put the second tourniquet above the initial tourniquet, not below it. You put it above the initial tourniquet. So this is an arm, which is once again an extremity, and he or she is applying the tourniquet on the arm. We don't see where it's bleeding. Another method that I know they don't really talk about here is high and tight, and that's why it might be higher up on the arm. She's putting the Velcro on, and then she's spinning the spin dial, and that is the thing that tightens it, and then she latches it in. She puts the Velcro through so that way it cinches on, and then she puts the time tab over the slot. She writes the time down where it says time. It's very important that you do so. Some people write the time on the opposite extremity of the hand or the leg, and then some people write it down on the forehead. Please, please do not do it with blood. There's been a common misconception that you can do it with blood. Blood can wash off and stuff like that. Please do it with a marker, or if you have a pen, then write it down somewhere that it's easy for EMS people to see. I'm going to show actually this once again. So she's putting on the tourniquet. She pushes it through the initial first buckle. She's tightening it down as much as possible when she's swinging it around, and then velcroing it. Then she spins the spin dial or the windlass to make sure, and she'll keep spinning it until the actual bleeding has stopped once again. The person will complain of discomfort, but keep spinning it until the actual bleeding has stopped. Then she latches the windlass into the position or locking position, continues to put the tourniquet lace through, and then puts the time tab over the locking mechanism. And then she writes down the time. Very, very important. It's a 20-second, I think she maybe did it even in 10-second, quick fix, and it will save somebody's life. They might lose a limb because of it, but it will save somebody's life. These are the different types of tourniquets. Most people, civilian use, have the CAT tourniquets, known as combat application tourniquet. Then there's the soft TT tourniquets, which are sometimes used in the military field. Then you have the SAM XT, you have the TX3, you have the RMT, and then you have the TMT. So a wide variety of tourniquets. Please watch out for tourniquets that you buy online. Most tourniquets are $30 or above. If they're any less than that, they're probably imitation ones. The last thing you want to do is to be applying a tourniquet on somebody and then have the windlass break on them. I guarantee you that person will go into shock real fast. Oh, okay, so these are the other tourniquets that they recommend, which we've talked about before. In all but the extremely young child, the same tourniquets used for adults can be used on children. For the infant or very small child, tourniquets are too big. Direct pressure on the wound, as described previously, will work on in virtually all cases. For large, deep wounds, wound packing can be performed on children just as in adults using the same technique as described previously. In the deep wound packing, which they're talking about, is where you stick your finger into the actual wound with the gauze and you're trying to push in as much gauze as possible inside the body. Impaled objects, improvised tourniquets, loss of arm or leg, pain, and then other questions. So with impaled objects, you do not move the object. You leave it there, and then you pack around the object to keep it contained from moving around. Improvised tourniquets, this program doesn't really talk about improvised tourniquets, and they actually do not recommend improvised tourniquets. If you go out in maybe a wilderness first aid setting, which are these classes that we teach, there are techniques to make an improvised tourniquet, but improvised tourniquets are almost 60% less effective, based on a medical journal that was recently published in 2020. So definitely, please get a tourniquet, which we actually sell. We sell North American Rescue tourniquets. A loss of arm or leg. Very seldom is an arm or a leg ever lost. I wouldn't say thanks to the wars that have happened, but we've learned from the wars that have happened that the loss of an arm or a leg basically doesn't happen. It can be 2, maybe 3 hours that a tourniquet is applied, and the person has almost 90%, 100% mobility back in the extremity. Pain. The tourniquet is very, very painful. Many people, they actually stop tightening the tourniquet because the actual patient is complaining of the pain. As I said, please continue to apply the tourniquet until the bleeding has stopped, regardless of if the person is complaining about the pain or not. Sometimes the patient wants to remove the tourniquet or loosen it up a little bit, And once again, I have to stress, please, please do not remove the tourniquet under any condition unless it's a paramedic or somebody that knows what they're doing. And then other questions, if you have other questions in regards to the slideshow that I presented, you can comment on below, or you can send us an email at info@campaignpayitforward.com. Thank you so much, and once again, thank you for actually taking the initiative to look at this video, and hopefully this will give you enough confidence to act within before EMS actually responds, because you will make a difference in somebody's life. Oh, there's a summary. Uh, Personal safety, the ABC, alert 911, find the bleeding, find all the bleeding. Just because you see a specific area that's bleeding, make sure to continue the head to toe assessment and you find out where all the bleeding is. Compress with pressure and or packing, compress with a tourniquet, and wait for help to arrive. For more information, you can go to stopthebleed.org. The only thing more tragic than death is a death that could have been prevented. Thank you so much for listening to the slideshow and listening to me.